here from Kit Guru, and in this video I'm taking a look at two different peripherals in the Gigabyte AORUS lineup. I've got the K7 keyboard and the M3 mouse. Both of these peripherals are actually quite affordable. The K7 mechanical keyboard is going to retail for around £82, and then the M3 mouse is only going to be retailing for around £28. I'm going to start off by talking about the M3 mouse, but I'm just going to quickly mention, even though it looks like the keyboard's LEDs are sort of like flickering on camera, they don't actually do that in real life. I think just because they're like older style LEDs, for some reason the refresh rate, like the camera is picking it up. So the M3 mouse I actually think is quite attractive. It's got this like matte black plastic body, which isn't really anything special, but I really like the sort of angular design, and it doesn't really look like a like more budget mouse. I think the branding is quite tastefully done. It's got the AORUS Eagle logo on the back, and that logo is actually RGB as well, so it can be fully customized using the Gigabyte AORUS engine software, which I'm going to talk a little bit about later on. The body of the mouse is a medium size that I think should suit most people. I have got smaller hands, but I can see it also suiting people that might have larger hands as well. It's not really a lightweight mouse. It does weigh in at 100 grams, but the results from a recent Kit Guru poll show that that's the weight that most people prefer, me included. I found this mouse is a really good weight for me. The shape of the mouse is slightly slanted off to the right, and it does have quite a pronounced arch as well. I think it does make it quite comfortable and supportive to use. I think the shape is going to suit pretty much all grip styles. I really like the left and right click on this mouse. They're sort of indented so that my fingers sit nicely in there and it stops them sort of sliding around. They're also separate from the body of the mouse, so they have a good defined click. They're not quite as nice to use as like the buttons on more expensive mice, but they don't have that sort of like cheap clunky feel. The two glossy buttons on the side of the mouse are quite shallow and lightweight to press. I haven't really had a problem with them, but I think they could be quite easy to accidentally press if you have larger hands than me. The sides of the mouse are coated in a soft touch rubber with a sort of like funky patination. I think the rubber is quite a good feature to find on this mouse, especially as it is more of a budget mouse. It definitely makes it easier to grip, and it should be more hard wearing than just like straight up plastic. However, I do think if you have quite a firm grip, I did find that the patination was quite intense and it did actually start to hurt my fingers a little bit after a while. The scroll wheel is also coated in the same sort of soft touch rubber. It's sort of your middle of the road scroll wheel really. It's a good width, and it has good defined bumps when you're scrolling. I think the overall build quality on this mouse could definitely be a little bit better. However, it is actually pretty decent in my opinion, especially for such a budget mouse. I didn't really find any issues until I did my sort of like shake and squeeze test, which isn't something most people do like when they're normally using a mouse. I mean, like, who picks up their mouse and just starts shaking it around? Basically, when I pick it up and shake it, you can hear that it rattles. This is because the scroll is a little bit on the loose side. I would like to see Gigabyte maybe work on that. It's not something that I noticed while I was using it, but it just shows that it's not as well made as it could be. Also, when I squeeze the mouse, it does sort of creak, and there's a little bit of flex to the body, so it shows that it maybe is made of like a cheaper, thinner plastic. The cable as well also isn't braided. I prefer to have braided cables on my peripherals. I just think it makes them a little bit more hard wearing, and it's also more attractive to look at as well. The coating on this cable is made of like a hard matte plastic, so it's not too bad. It means that it glides really nicely, it doesn't get caught on anything. It's also quite a good length as well at 1.8 meters. The sensor on this mouse is the Pixar 3988 sensor, and for some reason it just feels like really snappy to me. I'm not sure if it's just a feature of that particular sensor, as I haven't used a mouse with that sensor before. However, I've been using it on like my normal 3000 DPI, and it just feels like extra responsive. It definitely really suits FPS games, or if you're someone that likes a much quicker mouse. The DPI can be adjusted on the fly using the two buttons just below the scroll wheel on this mouse. The default settings are 1000, 2000, 3000 and 4000 DPI. There's also some white LEDs on the side that indicate which DPI setting is selected. Using the AORUS Gigabyte engine software, the DPI can be adjusted further from 500 up to 6400 DPI, and you can also change those 4 different profiles around as well, so you've got like 4 customized DPI settings. The lift off distance on this mouse is actually quite high by default, so I really recommend going into the Gigabyte software and actually using its calibration feature. It's a little bit on the buggy side, so it does take a little bit of effort to get it working, but I definitely think it's really worth doing, because after I calibrated it to my particular mouse mat, I got the lift off distance down to like 1 or 2 millimeters, which isn't the best that I've seen, but it's certainly a lot better than the default setting. The sensor is probably the most important feature on a mouse, and fortunately on the M3 mouse the PixArt sensor is going to be perfect for gaming. Overall, I do actually really like the M3 mouse. It has got a few issues with build quality, but I found it really good to use, and I think it is a really good price as well. Now I'm going to move on to my review of the K7 keyboard. Like I mentioned at the start, it retails for around £82. I think the price is actually one of the main benefits on this keyboard, because it does actually tick quite a few boxes in the high-end keyboard category, and as like mechanical keyboards go, £82 is actually more affordable, because with the features that it has, you can sort of be getting up to like £120, £150, so you can actually save quite a bit of money with this keyboard. I think this keyboard is really beautiful to look at. It's got this sort of like brushed aluminium faceplate that makes it look very sort of like premium. The orange copper trim around the outside does actually look a little bit odd, but the orange does match the sort of like AORUS theme, so I guess that's why it's there. The branding is nice and tasteful. It's got the sort of light up RGB eagle logo, the same as what's on the mouse, and then it's also got AORUS painted in the bottom right hand corner as well, so the branding isn't too over the top. The customizable RGB lighting, you can change it all using the Gigabyte software, or it can also be changed on the fly as well. It reflects really nicely off this sort of aluminium surface, however I do wish the LEDs were a little bit on the brighter side. Even though this keyboard does have this sort of like fancy brushed aluminium faceplate, it's quite lightweight. It only weighs about 800 grams, which is not very heavy for a full-size keyboard. This is because the back is made of a sort of cheap black plastic basically. I sort of expected this price point, but it means that the keyboard isn't quite as sturdy as it could be. Also, I noticed around the edge of the aluminium faceplate, it is actually quite a bit sharp and unfinished. I think it is something that Gigabyte should work on, as it does mean that it's slightly unsafe, and I would recommend being a little bit careful when you're sort of moving it around your desk. The keyboard has 4 rubber feet on the bottom, so it grips nicely to the desk. It doesn't move around too much. The height is also adjustable as well. I really like the design of the adjustable feet on this keyboard. They work off sort of like a scroll wheel design, so not only does it make them like more customizable rather than just sort of like up and down, it also means that they don't do that like randomly flicking down when you move the keyboard around, like while you're trying to play a game on it, and it's definitely much better than those like cheap sort of flip out plastic feet. Unfortunately, the cable on this keyboard isn't braided. It is just sort of a smooth glossy cable, but it is a pretty decent length at 2 meters. Unfortunately, this keyboard doesn't come with a wrist rest. Honestly though, at this price point I wouldn't really expect one. Fortunately, the side of the body is slanted though, so it's still quite comfortable to lean your wrist against. Using the function key on this keyboard, there is access to a ton of different shortcuts. Unfortunately, some of the media control keys are a little bit awkward to reach with one hand, so they do require 2 hands. But there's also access to open a media player, there's a shortcut to open a browser, there's also a shortcut for a calculator as well. Using the function key is also how you can adjust the RGB lighting on this keyboard, sort of on the fly. I find it easier to do that rather than using the AORUS Gigabyte engine, which I'll talk a little bit about at the end. But you basically got options to change between 8 different settings. There's like a breathing, there's like a rainbow, there's like static color as well. You can change the brightness settings, you can change the frequency, so like how fast it is, and you can also change the direction as well. So you've got quite a lot of customization just using the keyboard. The keys on the K7 are raised off the body, which is what I prefer. They look good, the lighting shines out nicely, and also find them a bit easier to clean as well. The font that Gigabyte have opted to use is pretty basic, it's nice and clear, and it matches the overall design really nicely. The keycaps themselves aren't really anything that special, but they do provide quite a good typing experience. Also in the box you get 8 extra like bright orange keycaps, and there's also a keycap puller in as well, so you have a little bit of like extra customization. I was surprised to see that this keyboard uses Cherry and Max mechanical switches, just because it's more of a budget keyboard, so I was expecting it to use a different brand, but Cherry Max switches are definitely a bonus. It is only available with the option of red switches, which does actually make sense because they are the more preferable switches for gaming with, and of course this is like a gaming keyboard. They are linear switches, that means that they're smooth with no sort of tactile bump to them, and they're also one of the quieter mechanical switches as well because they don't have that sort of like click. They are one of my more favourite mechanical switches to use, so I had a great time typing and gaming on this keyboard. I think it provides a very good user experience. Also good to mention is that it has full end key rollover and anti-ghosting as well, so every key press should register as it should. So now I'm going to move on to talk about the AORUS software. Basically it's what I think lets these two peripherals down, unfortunately. Thankfully you can use them pretty well without actually using the software at all, but in order to get the sort of full range of functionality you do actually have to try and use the software. One of the main issues is that Gigabyte have decided to bundle it with their graphics engine software. And when I started using the software, I had my RX 580 and it basically affected the clock speeds and turned it into a potato. I did feed back to Gigabyte, however, and they have actually sort of corrected the issue now, so it shouldn't cause any problems if you don't have a Gigabyte graphics card. One of the confusing things as well is that on the box of the peripherals it actually says it uses the RGB Fusion software, which is the software that works with Gigabyte motherboards, but I have spoken to Gigabyte and they've told me the software that works, the software to use, is the Gigabyte AORUS graphics engine, not the RGB Fusion software. The AORUS engine software is actually the one that's in the download page for both the keyboard and mouse on their website as well. I'm not sure why Gigabyte have opted to bundle their peripheral software in with their graphics engine software. I just think it's going to cause confusion and compatibility issues. I can just see someone like downloading the software for their peripherals, not knowing what the like overclocking page does, playing around with all the sliders and then basically just like exploding their graphics card or blue screen their computer. Basically I just think it would be much better if Gigabyte created separate software for their peripherals. So I'm going to move on to talking about the software. I'm going to show you it. I'm going to have to make it a lot bigger on the screen for you because as you can see it is really tiny. One of the issues with the software is basically how small it is. I've got a 4K monitor and as you can see it's really small, it's fuzzy as well, and it also means that some of the text is really quite tiny. So yeah, as you can see it's much too small, looks fuzzy, the text is small on a 4K monitor. There's no option to make it bigger as well, so hopefully Gigabyte update that with a fix just so you can like maximize it or maybe change the resolution. I'm going to start off talking about the mouse. So you can, on the first page is the LED option page. You can create profiles, you can create macros. Creating macros is a real task. It took me a bit of time to sort of figure out how to do it. It's not that easy to do. It's not really intuitive like other software I find is often really intuitive and easy, but it does work eventually. You can control the lighting effects, turn them off and on, change the setting, and I have actually got it synced up with the keyboard at the moment, so it does have more limited options than it would normally. On the second page you can obviously reprogram what all the different buttons do. Once again works, but not intuitive as you would hope it to be. And then on the pointer page, this is where you can adjust the DPI and where the text is at its smallest. It's so hard to read those numbers across there. But yeah, you can change the DPI settings for the 4 different profiles. You can change the report rate, which is like the polling rate. And then the most important bit on the section is like the calibration. So once it loads up, and once you can get it working, you can calibrate the mouse to the particular mouse mat that you're using, and then change the lift-off tolerance. But I would just say keep at it. It does work eventually. I did get it working. It's just a bit of a pain, pain to get there, but it does work and does improve the lift-off distance. On the keyboard, it's the same sort of options really. You can create macros, you can make different profiles, you can sync the lighting with the other peripherals. The only weird thing I've noticed is there is a difference between the synchronized lighting settings on the mouse or the keyboard. They both have like different options. It's just a little bit weird. I think they should have the same menu really. But yeah, once again, you can change the lighting effects, but I actually prefer to do them on the keyboard. On the key assign tab, you can of course like reassign all the different keys to, and then you can put the macros in as well. So overall, the software does actually have quite a bit of functionality. It's just the fact that it's too small, it's a bit buggy, and I really wish Gigabyte would create separate software for their peripherals and not have it bundled with the graphics engine software, which I think is just going to cause issues. Overall, I think Gigabyte actually did quite a good job of these AORUS peripherals when it comes to the hardware side of things. I actually really quite enjoyed using them. Unfortunately, the software really lets it down. It definitely needs a lot of work. I don't really think it's fit for purpose at the moment. The keyboard not only looks really good with its sort of like brushed aluminium face and RGB lighting, but it also provides a really good sort of like typing and gaming experience thanks to those Cherry MX switches. The M3 mouse is very comfortable to use. It also has really good gaming performance, and I think it is a really good mouse for under £30. I actually rate these peripherals both quite highly, and I think if you're someone that is after like high-end performance but you want something that's more of a budget price tag, then I think both these peripherals are actually a really good option. If you like this video from KitGuru, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more from KitGuru, hit the subscribe button, and there's also a little bell icon there as well. If you hit that one, you'll get a notification of whenever a new video goes live.